Hello all and welcome, and I am the Realist Philosopher, and in this video I would like to discuss the subject of logical fallacies. Now you might ask yourself, why? Why do you want to discuss logical fallacies? It sounds so dry and boring. Not really. Not only is it very interesting, but it's also quite useful. You see, oftentimes people make mistakes in their reasoning. They make mistakes in their use of logic, and just as often people don't see it. The left especially hates logic and the ability to spot logical fallacies because so often their arguments are 100% completely without any logic or reason, lots of contradictions, riddled with logical fallacies. Essentially, their arguments just make no sense. And that's, of course, why they hate logic, they hate debate, they hate reason. They've branded logic as a white man's invention that nobody else needs to use. It's evil. It's part of the evil white male patriarchy, and it's meant to give them privilege and power. Well, there is a certain amount of power in being able to spot other people's bullshit. Okay? So, there's that, all right? So that's part of why I want to present you with some of the most common logical fallacies you're going to run into in everyday life. So let's begin, shall we? Now, fallacies are, in essence, mistaken beliefs based on unsound arguments. They derive from reasoning that is logically incorrect, thus undermining an argument's validity. Fallacies can be difficult to classify due to their variety in application and structure. In the broadest sense possible, fallacies can be divided into two types: formal fallacies and informal fallacies. Okay, so let's start off with number one, referred to as the masked man fallacy, also known as the intentional fallacy. And this fallacy involves a substitution of parties. And if the two things that are interchanged are identical or seem identical, then the argument is assumed to be valid. So here's a good example. Jeremy has a private investigator, and the private investigator reported that a man with a beard was having dinner with his wife. Jeremy's best friend, Ronnie, just happens to have a beard. Therefore, it must have been Ronnie who was having dinner with and an affair with Jeremy's wife. So I think automatically you can see the problem with this argument, okay? Both men have beards. So I know somebody with a beard, so it must have been him. And people make these kind of substitutions all the time. They latch onto one very small trait that is identical to some other trait, and it in no way, shape, or form actually answers the question, solves the problem, or proves anything. But yeah, on the surface, yeah, it looks real good until you reduce it to such an absurd level, and then you realize, oh yeah, that really didn't make any sense. So that's a really very common logical fallacy. So the next logical fallacy we have is the begging of the question. So the opinion to be proved is given as if it was already proved, right? So for example, global warming exists because the earth is getting warmer. What? So you're positing a claim, and you're essentially not positing it as a claim, but a fact, right? So we see this all the time. People make these claims, and they promote them as facts, saying, well, the earth's getting warmer, hence global warming is a real thing. Implying that essentially the type of global warming that we've all become familiar with, the kind where it's mankind that's creating it, hence mankind can have some kind of effect on it, is so often posited. And we hear this all the time. It hasn't been proven. It hasn't been proven. You're essentially taking what is your opinion and turning it into a fact, and then presenting it as if what is really just a claim with no evidence and no argument was a fact. And again, this is something you see all the time, and this is called begging the question. Now, fallacy number 3 is called the either-or fallacy. Again, you see this all the time. So, discussing an issue as if there are only two alternatives. By the way, what this fallacy essentially does is it ignores all other possible alternatives. For example, we either ban hairspray or the world will end. All right, so, all right, because hairspray used to have these bad chemicals that would get up into the atmosphere to destroy the ozone layer and such. I don't think they do anymore. But yeah, this is not only very hyperbolic speech, but, aren't there other alternatives? Aren't there other possible causes, by the way, of, deterioration of the ozone layer or possible global warming causes? Of course. Of course. So generally speaking, this either-or fallacy gives you two choices. You either do one or some horrible thing will happen and that's the other, right? There couldn't be anything in between, right? And usually this is to promote some kind of agenda, some kind of bias that a person has. So when you see somebody promoting this either-or scenario, you'll know it is a logical fallacy when you spot it. Number 4, evasion. So evasion is what we so often see in politics. You ever watch TV and watch these politicians and they don't answer questions? I mean, you ask them a question, you ask for an argument, you ask them to explain something, and instead of doing so, they just do a dodge, they evade. It's like a distraction, right? So it's ignoring or evading the question. Example, a reporter says, Senator, what is your view on global warming? The senator says, global warming is definitely something we need to look into. So the reason this is presented as a logical fallacy is because you're not answering the question. You're answering the question incorrectly, all right? So in that sense, it's a fallacy. You are presenting information, you are presenting views, you're presenting that which is in no way, shape, or form at all related to the question being asked for you. So it's a fallacy. Number 5, the false analogy. It's very common. It's very difficult oftentimes for people to get classifications correct. So oftentimes they compare things that have very little in common and therefore don't qualify as being in the same category. And by the way, the category can oftentimes have to do with the type of analogy you're doing. So sometimes things that on the surface can seem like they have nothing in common after you've done some comparison and shown otherwise. It's like, okay, that analogy works. So making a comparison between two subjects that have more dissimilarities than similarities. For example, using hairspray every day is like launching a nuclear weapon. Right. I mean, you can have the little hamster running around in his wheel at full speed, at super speed, at the speed of the Flash. You can give him the Speed Force. It's nothing that little hamster does is going to make that make any sense, right? Hairspray has nothing to do with the nuclear weapon. It's in no way, shape, or form similar. There's no kind of comparison that can be made. While, on the other hand, there are comparisons that are oftentimes presented as false analogies, which are not, right? For example, the gun to car analogy, right? So you've heard this before, right? Well, geez, guns are horrible, guns are evil, right? The left says guns are horrible and evil and guns kill people, right? Why don't we ban cars too, right? Because cars kill people and, people on the left. And then you hear somebody on the left will reply, oh, well, there's a big difference between a car and a gun, right? A car serves your purpose. Okay, so that right there is not an argument, right? You're saying that guns essentially serve no purpose. That's a subjective assessment. It's a personal opinion in no way, shape, or form based in fact. It's also wrong. So guns serve a number of different purposes. They can be used to defend yourself. They can be used to defend your country. They deter crime. They serve a lot of different purposes. A car, it carries stuff and, it does, it promotes transport and trade across the country. Tools have a function. They have a use. All right. People arguing and saying that guns' only purpose is to kill, and that's their purpose, while the purpose of a car is to deliver goods and to provide services and to carry people around. That's trying to move the goalpost, change the argument to a different kind of contextual analysis, area of classification, so that you can promote it as a false analogy. It's very dishonest. So, car is a tool, gun is a tool. Cars can be used to run people down, essentially kill people in vast numbers, so can guns. Both can do good, both can do evil, right? I mean, these are essentially comparisons that can be made. And in that context, they have more in common than they do out of common. Now, okay, so next logical fallacy is the rationalization fallacy. So this involves giving incorrect reasons to justify your position. Example, I don't believe in global warming because I like using hairspray. Or I believe in global warming because I don't like hairspray. What? Okay, yeah, so obviously that's a logical fallacy, right? Or I don't believe in global warming because I love to drive and I just can't accept the possibility. I don't want to believe that, people do something every day that is so wonderful and contributes so much to our lives that's damaging our environment, right? So, that's nothing more than a rationalization, right? And it's based on feelings, not facts. You're seeking to rationalize what is essentially an illogical position. Okay, so number 7, equivocation. What equivocation is essentially a juvenile trick of the language, right? So let me give you some examples. Number 1. So if there's really global warming, how come it's cooler in Fullerton this year? What? So that's an equivocation fallacy. Let me give you another. So if the universe was designed, wouldn't we have figured it out by now? Or, if the universe wasn't designed, wouldn't we have figured it out by now? Right. So these are just little tricks of language, right, to try and convince people of your illogical, unreasonable argument. So now you'll know them when you see them, and you'll be able to label them as equivocation. All right, anyhow, moving on. So next. So, number 9, the slippery slope fallacy. Now, I'm sure you know this one. We've all heard the slippery slope. Anybody that's watched these crime dramas where the lawyers get up and start talking, it's going to create a slippery slope if you do that, Your Honor. And you watch the talking head shows, right? And whenever the pundit comes up, usually somebody on the right, by the way, because the left is not really concerned about the possibility of things going bad from infringing on people's rights, they start to use the term, it's a very slippery slope if we go down this road. Okay, so the implication is this, that one small step in the wrong direction will cause catastrophic results, right? For example, if we use just one more can of hairspray this month, the Earth as we know it will no longer exist, right? So, you've heard these kind of slippery slope arguments before. So they're a form of alarmist speech meant to get you to side with the speaker, right? But the slippery slope argument is a logical fallacy, okay? Because it relies largely on imagination and idealism, solipsism, all right? It relies on abstraction, right? It relies on making someone's imagination make a stellar leap from, this one small step to this giant, huge, cataclysm-like event, right? When there's no evidence of any kind to show that will occur. You're just, yeah, geez, if I do this, maybe that could happen, or maybe that'll happen, or maybe this will happen. You got to be very careful with these kind of arguments. Okay, slippery slope fallacy, it's very common, and it draws on people's fears, generally speaking, and their tendency to imagine the worst possible outcome to get you to side with the speaker. So, yeah, that's a very common fallacy. Number 10. Oh, boy, this is one of my favorites. 2 wrongs make a right. Oh, boy. So I don't think there's any logical fallacy that is employed more often in today's modern Western world than this one. And it has caused so many problems. This one single logical fallacy that it's really hard to imagine. Everything from affirmative action to feminism to the anti-male sentiments in society to the ideas of the patriarchy and using that to justify all of these wrongs being done to balance out inequities of the past. Well, women and blacks and other oppressed minorities have been treated so poorly in the past, so it's time that we make things better for them by making them worse for everybody else. And doing all the wrongs that we accuse the other side of doing, which makes us no better, and in fact makes us, worse because we're doing it quite on purpose, where oftentimes in the past these things were done without thinking. Yes, it is one of the most common logical fallacies, and again, it's caused so many problems in modern day life, right? Affirmative action, one good example right there. The court overwhelmingly giving custody to the woman and alimony to the woman and child support to the woman and letting women off the hook every time they do something wrong. Meanwhile, throwing the book at the guy who does the exact same thing or even less, but he gets harsher charges, right? Because men are bad, men are evil, men need to be punished more because of all the horrible wrongdoings they've committed in the past. Meanwhile, women are victims of men, they're an oppressed minority, so they have some excuse for their actions, right? They can be blamed on men, right? So we're going to give them a lighter sentence. We're going to give them a hand up, right? We're going to help them and harm the man. So that's the two wrongs make a right fallacy, the belief that if you try to correct an inequity, a wrong, by doing another wrong, that's somehow a good thing. That'll equalize things and balance them out, right? When, of course, what it really does, it just, things are just as bad, if not worse. The inequality and the wrongdoing was here, and the inequity was like this, and now the sides have just been switched, but now it's even more so, right? Because you've got people who are trying to take advantage of that narrative and use the idea that wrongs need to be done now. And so people are going to take advantage. So it's going to actually end up worse than it was. So number 11, false cause fallacy. So citing a false or remote cause to explain a situation. For example, the increase in global warming in the past decade is because more teenagers are using hairspray. No evidence. So you're essentially naming an effect, and then you are naming a cause. And you have no evidence. You're just positing this claim as if it was a fact, right? So you can substitute teenagers for whatever, right? You can substitute it for cows, right? Mankind is raising more cattle, and the methane from all the cows farting is contributing a great deal to global warming. And that's actually true. In fact, animals, living organic beings, contribute to global warming way more than fossil fuels and cars burning those fossil fuels do. So, yeah, there's actually some truth to that. The teenager one, though, no evidence that this remote possible cause, possible because I want to believe it's possible, is the cause. And what's the citing of a remote cause? Well, a remote cause is more difficult to disprove. So you name something that's remote, you name something that is harder to investigate, thereby making it more difficult to rebut your claims. It's a very dishonest logical fallacy. So next, and the final fallacy I'm going to cover for this video is the non sequitur. Now, this is a fallacy wherein someone asserts a conclusion that does not follow from the proposition. Let me give you an example. All Dubliners are from Ireland. Ronan is not a Dubliner, therefore he's not Irish. You see what it is? So you see the problem with that argument, right? So here's another example. All physical fitness trainers believe in physical fitness. John is fat, so he can't be a physical fitness trainer. So, do you see the problem there? Okay. Or, Ford is an American-made car. This car here was made in Bangladesh, so it can't be a Ford. Are you seeing the issue here? So, in that one, it ignores the possibility that Ford, which is an American-owned company, could be making cars in another country. Also ignores the possibility that the physical fitness trainer can hold the belief that physical fitness is important, but still be fat. One doesn't exclude him doing the other. And of course, the Dubliner one is very obvious. So that's a non sequitur logical fallacy. So that's it for the formal fallacies. In my next video, and maybe the one after that, I'm going to cover informal logical fallacies, and there's way more of that. And I suggest you check it out because the informal fallacies are a lot funnier, a lot more fun, and interesting to talk about. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. And I hope if you like my content, you'll take a look at my twice a week podcast, which I do on my Patreon page. You'll find the link in the description below. It's a per piece donation platform where I make 2 podcasts a week. So you can donate as little as $1, which would be $8 a month. So that would be like a subscription of a type. And in return, you get a funny, fun, 2-hour plus podcast full of dark humor, social, political commentary, philosophy. It's a great time. It's designed specifically for men. And I also have a once a month donation platform if you like my content, but $8 a month is too rich for your blood. I also have a link for that in the description. And also, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter at TheRealist1967. So that's it. I'm the Realist Philosopher, and I wish you a good day. Take care.